Xenobiologist Zyx'na adjusted her multispectral goggles for the 100th time that day, her forehands simultaneously taking notes, adjusting equipment, and nervously twirling her sensory tendrils. The subject of her observation, a human settlement in what they called Minnesota, continued their bizarre daily routines, completely unaware of her presence in the cloaked research pod, hovering 300 meters above their heads. Day 47 of human observation, she dictated to her neural recorder. The subjects continued to display their peculiar resistance to environmental extremes. Despite temperatures dropping to levels that would crystallize a centaurian's blood, they persist in their outdoor activities. Most disturbing is their tendency to purposely slide down frozen precipitation slopes on primitive wooden planks. Current hypothesis: possible genetic modification for cold resistance, or perhaps mass insanity. A notification pinged in her peripheral vision, another message from her superior, Dr. Vendrix. She tried to ignore it, but the persistent blinking was designed to be impossible to dismiss. With an exasperated wave of her lower right hand, she opened the message. Urgent reminder: maintain minimum safe distance of 500 meters from human settlement. Previous incidents of human unpredictability have resulted in catastrophic failures of first contact protocols. Exercise extreme caution. Their barbaric tendencies are well documented. Zyx'na sent back a quick acknowledgement, though she couldn't help but add a subtle glyph of annoyance to her response. She'd read all the warnings, studied all the reports. Humans were supposedly the most dangerous species in the known galaxy, not because of their technology, which was laughably primitive, but because they were unpredictable and illogical. Addendum to previous observations, she continued recording. Human subject displaying typical aggressive behavior, violently manipulating processed plant and animal matter with metallic implements. Then, she zoomed in with her goggles, inserting it into their food orifice. Barbaric. Note: they call this cooking and eating lunch. Her attention was drawn to a particularly peculiar scene. A human juvenile had fallen on the frozen ground, and instead of showing appropriate distress, was moving their limbs in a systematic pattern, creating geometric shapes in the snow. Even more bizarre, the adult human nearby was encouraging this behavior. Possible ritualistic ground-marking behavior observed, purpose unknown. Add to growing list of inexplicable human activities, cross-reference with previous observations of snow angels, though I suspect the translation matrix is malfunctioning on that term. Angels are mythological beings, and this appears to be more of a territorial marking display. Zyx'na's lower left hand reached for her stimulant capsules, essential for maintaining focus during these long observation sessions. As she popped one into her mouth, she noticed a human doing something similar with what her database identified as coffee. At least they shared some behaviors, though humans took their stimulants at ridiculously high temperatures. Final note for today's morning session: humans continue to show signs of possible collective madness. They persist in residing in an environment that requires them to wrap themselves in layers of processed fiber just to survive, yet they appear to derive pleasure from this hostile habitat. Further study needed to understand this apparent evolutionary disadvantage. She began powering down her observation equipment, already dreading having to write up today's report. How could she possibly explain to the Galactic Scientific Council that humans voluntarily participated in something called winter sports without sounding like she was documenting mass psychological dysfunction? The next morning, Zyx'na made what she would later call in her report a critical error in judgment, though her colleague Rexthar would simply call it the coffee incident. Her stimulant capsules had run out, and in a moment of sleep-deprived desperation, she decided to try acquiring the human stimulant known as coffee. Her species' camouflage suit was top-of-the-line Galactic Council technology. It should handle a simple retrieval mission. The small establishment called Bob's Coffee and Donuts seemed quiet enough at 0600 local time. Zyx'na adjusted her human disguise one final time. She'd chosen the appearance of what her database called a typical office worker, complete with an outdated fashion choice called a pantsuit. Everything went smoothly until she reached the counter. The human behind it, whose name tag read Chuck, smiled and asked, "What can I get you?" Zyx'na had practiced human speech. She'd studied their crude language patterns. She was prepared for this. Yes, I would enjoy one coffee, please, fellow human. I require liquid stimulation to perform my normal human job functions. Chuck's eyebrow raised slightly, but he nodded. Regular or decaf? This wasn't in her research. Zyx'na felt her anxiety spike, and with it, her camouflage suit's cooling system began to malfunction. The one with maximum stimulant properties. I wish to experience the full effect of your human bean water. That's when she noticed her right hand was flickering between human peachy pink and her natural blue-green. She shoved it into her pocket, but the malfunction was spreading. The suit's temperature regulation was failing completely. Chuck was staring now, coffee pot frozen mid-pour. Ma'am, you're kind of glowing and turning blue? This is a normal human skin condition, Zyx'na declared, her voice rising an octave. I have what you call hypothermia. Yes, that is why I need the hot bean liquid immediately. Pretty sure hypothermia doesn't make people glow, Chuck said, remarkably calm for someone watching a supposed human turn increasingly translucent. Though I gotta say, that's a neat trick with the extra arms there. Zyx'na looked down in horror. All four of her arms were now visible, her camouflage suit glitching between human business attire and its true form. I can explain. This is a new fashion trend called quantum fashion. Chuck set down the coffee pot and leaned forward on the counter, grinning. You know what? I've been working the morning shift at this coffee shop for 15 years. This isn't even the weirdest thing I've seen before 7 a.m. You want that coffee with cream and sugar? Zyx'na's sensory tendrils, now fully visible, curled in confusion. You are not going to sound the alarm? Contact your military? Attempt to capture me for scientific experimentation? Lady, it's way too early for all that. Besides, you're what, the third alien I've had in here this month? Though I gotta say, first one trying to pull off a pantsuit. Bold choice. Third alien? Zyx'na's translator must be malfunctioning too. Chuck nodded, already preparing her coffee. Yeah, there's this nice couple of Andromedans who come in every Tuesday. They love the blueberry muffins. Speaking of which, he reached under the counter and pulled out a paper bag. On the house, you look like you're having a rough morning. Zyx'na stood there, camouflage suit still fritzing, holding a cup of coffee in one hand and a bag of muffins in another. And thanks to having 4 arms, still able to reach for her research tablet with the remaining 2. Thank you, but my research indicates humans fear the unknown and react violently to any sign of alien life. Chuck shrugged. Maybe some do. Me, I just want to make it to my lunch break. That'll be $3.50 for the coffee. And hey, next time, skip the pantsuit. Business casual is way more believable for this neighborhood. The universe, it seemed, wasn't done throwing Zyx'na into uncomfortable human interactions. 3 days after the coffee shop incident, her research pod's primary propulsion system decided to fail spectacularly. Not a gentle, gradual failure that would allow her to limp back to the main research vessel. No, this was the kind of failure that involved lots of flashing red lights, multiple alarm systems screaming in 3 different languages, and the kind of descent pattern that her flight instructor would have called, technically not falling, but only because we're being optimistic. Mayday, Mayday, she called into her emergency beacon. Research pod Z-419 requesting immediate assistance. All systems failing. Emergency landing imminent in human territory. The response from her superior was predictably unhelpful. Maintain protocol. Avoid human contact. Assistance will arrive in approximately 47 standard hours. 47 hours, Zyx'na shouted at the communication panel, all 4 hands frantically working different control surfaces. I'll be lucky to maintain flight for 47 seconds. She spotted what appeared to be a suitable landing zone, a large building with an open area behind it. As she got closer, she could make out the words Big Joe's Auto Repair on the sign, along with something about "We fix anything," painted in garish colors. Well, Big Joe, Zyx'na muttered as she aimed for the back lot, let's test that claim. The landing was less of a controlled descent and more of a negotiated crash. Her pod skidded across the snowy ground, taking out what appeared to be a collection of damaged human vehicles, before coming to rest against a large metal container. The impact triggered her pod's automated camouflage system, which helpfully flickered a few times before settling on the appearance of a 1973 Ford Pinto. Of all the Earth vehicles in the database, she groaned, it had to pick that one. "Holy smokes," a voice called out. "That's some entrance you made there." A human emerged from the building, wiping grease-covered hands on a rag. He was tall, wearing coveralls covered in various stains, and sporting an impressive quantity of facial hair. This, Zyx'na's database helpfully supplied, was what humans called a beard. "I am experiencing mechanical difficulties," Zyx'na said through the pod's external speaker, trying to maintain her cover despite the fact that her car was quietly humming and occasionally emitting small bursts of plasma from its exhaust ports. The human, who, according to his coveralls, was Big Joe himself, walked around the pod, whistling. "Well, I'll be damned. Haven't seen a Pinto in years. Though I gotta say, I don't remember them having quite so many unusual features or glowing quite this much." "It's a custom model?" "Uh-huh." Joe nodded, then knocked on the pod's hull. "And I suppose the alien writing along the side here is just fancy pinstriping?" Zyx'na's sensory tendrils curled in resignation. "I don't suppose you'd believe this is a very elaborate art car?" "After what Chuck told me about his coffee shop visitor, nah," Joe grinned. "Besides, I've been fixing things that ain't supposed to exist for years. You wouldn't believe how many normal Earth vehicles I get in here that just happen to run on antimatter." You know about antimatter propulsion?" "Lady, in this business, you either learn fast or you end up with a lot of explaining to do when the insurance company asks why there's a small dimensional rift in your paint booth." He peered into what was supposed to look like a Pinto's engine compartment but was actually Zyx'na's main drive core. "Huh. Looks like your quantum field stabilizer's out of alignment. That's probably why your artificial gravity's been fluctuating." "How could you possibly know that?" Joe shrugged. "Same principle as a timing belt, just with more potential for causing localized violations of physics. Tell you what, pull it into Bay 3, and I'll have you running better than new in a couple hours. Might even be able to upgrade your camouflage system so it picks something better than a Pinto next time. But my superior ordered me to avoid human contact and wait for official assistance." "Which will take what, 2 days? Meanwhile, you're sitting in my lot looking like the world's most suspicious Pinto, occasionally shooting plasma into the air. Pretty sure that's going to attract more attention than letting me fix it." He pulled out a tablet that looked suspiciously more advanced than typical human technology. "Besides, I'm certified by the Galactic Mechanics Guild. Have been for years. Humans might not be officially part of the galactic community yet, but some of us have been keeping things running behind the scenes for a while now." Zyx'na's research training was screaming at her to maintain protocol, but her pod chose that moment to emit a concerning grinding noise, followed by what appeared to be a small temporal hiccup. "How much for the repairs?" "For a fellow Chuck's Coffee regular, parts and labor at cost. Though I wouldn't say no to some data on how that biocamouflage suit of yours works. Been trying to figure those out for years." The research station erupted into chaos the moment Zyx'na's pod docked. She hadn't even powered down her engines before her superior, Dr. Vendrix, came charging down the corridor, all 6 eye stalks rigid with alarm. "Explain," he bellowed, waving a datapad displaying multiple incident reports. "First, unauthorized proximity to human settlement, then direct contact in a primitive refreshment establishment. And now you let one of them repair your pod." "Technically," Zyx'na pointed out, "the pod's camouflage system chose to appear as a Pinto. I had no control over that poor decision." "This is no time for humor," Dr. Vendrix's eye stalks quivered. "Do you have any idea how many protocols you've violated? The paperwork alone will take 3 solar cycles to complete." Around them, the station's crew was having what could only be described as a collective meltdown. Research assistant Cullerix was running in circles, shredding important documents and screaming about contamination protocols. Chief Security Officer Baxator had locked himself in his office, declaring a Level 7 emergency and demanding everyone submit to immediate decontamination, despite the fact that Zyx'na was the only one who'd had any contact with humans. "The Oversight Committee is on their way," Dr. Vendrix moaned. "They're bringing auditors. Auditors, Zyx'na. I really don't see why everyone's so—" "Warning," the station's AI announced with suspicious glee. "Unidentified vehicle approaching station." Everyone froze. The main view screen activated, showing a beaten-up tow truck floating in space near the station. The driver was wearing a familiar grease-stained coverall. "Hey there," Big Joe's voice crackled over the comm. "Sorry to drop by unannounced, but you left your quantum spanner in my shop." Figured you might need it. The chaos that ensued made the previous panic look like a meditation session. Dr. Vendrix fainted, all 6 eye stalks going limp at once. Research assistant Clarix tried to flush himself down the waste recycling chute. 3 different emergency alarms started blaring, each trying to be louder than the others. "How did he even find us?" someone shrieked. "We're cloaked." "Oh, that old cloaking system," Joe's voice came through again. "Yeah, you might want to upgrade that. It's got the same glitch as a 95 Civics timing belt. Works fine until it doesn't. I can fix it while I'm here if you want." Zyx'na watched in amazement as the station's professional, highly trained crew completely lost their composure. Chief Medical Officer Tixelara was frantically trying to revive Dr. Vendrix while simultaneously attempting to quarantine the entire command center with nothing but office supplies and determination. The station's AI was no help, having apparently decided this was the perfect time to start playing ancient human music, specifically something called the Final Countdown. "This is impossible," the head of research security declared, emerging from his office in what appeared to be a homemade hazmat suit constructed from cafeteria supplies. "Humans don't have space travel technology advanced enough to reach us. They barely made it to their own moon." "Actually," Joe's voice came through again, "that's a funny story. See, back in 73, my granddad helped this stranded Rigelian fix his ship, and well, one thing led to another." The bureaucratic nightmare that followed would become legendary in Galactic Council records. Forms had to be filed in quintuplicate, then shredded, then filed again because someone forgot to stamp them with the correct shade of purple ink. The Oversight Committee demanded extensive interviews with everyone involved, leading to the surreal sight of 3 high-ranking council members trying to maintain their dignity while Big Joe explained the similarities between quantum drives and carburetors. Zyx'na found herself filling out such classics as Form X1123B, Accidental Revelation of Advanced Technology to Supposedly Primitive Species, Coffee Shop Incident Addendum, and Form TR 789, Unauthorized Repairs by Unofficially Space-Capable Species, including warranty information. "You know what the real kicker is?" Joe said, now comfortably seated in the station's cafeteria, drinking what he claimed was subpar coffee compared to Chuck's. "You folks aren't even the only research station out here. There's 3 others just in this sector, all studying humans, all convinced they're being super sneaky about it." But our mission is classified," protested one of the auditors, who had given up on maintaining professional distance and was now deeply invested in Joe's story. "Sure it is," Joe nodded, "just like that weather balloon I fixed last month for the Andromedans. Speaking of which, you might want to coordinate with them. Pretty sure you're all writing reports about the same humans." As the bureaucratic storm raged on, Zyx'na found herself reviewing her research notes with fresh eyes. All those behaviors she'd classified as potentially aggressive or signs of collective madness started to look different. The humans weren't surviving their harsh environment. They were adapting to it, even enjoying it. Those primitive wooden planks for sliding down frozen slopes, recreation, the mysterious snow angels, pure joy. "You know what your problem is?" Chuck said during one of her now regular coffee runs, officially classified as ongoing cultural research in her reports. "You folks overthink everything. Humans, we see a problem, we fix it, maybe not perfectly, maybe with duct tape and wishful thinking, but we make it work. But that's not how advanced civilizations operate," Zyx'na protested, now comfortable enough to let her sensory tendrils wave freely in the coffee shop. "There should be committees, risk assessments, proper protocols." "Like that protocol saying you shouldn't be having coffee with a human," Chuck grinned, sliding her usual order across the counter. "How's that working out?" The pieces started falling into place. Humans weren't primitive, they were pragmatic. Their solutions might look crude to advanced species, but they worked. While the Galactic Council was still debating the proper procedure for handling frigid environments, humans had already invented hot chocolate and hockey. "They're all connected," Zyx'na explained to her increasingly resigned superior. "The repair shops, the coffee places, the small businesses, they're unofficial first contact points. Humans have been quietly helping stranded aliens for years, building a network of friendship and mechanical expertise right under our noses." "Please stop talking," Dr. Vendrix moaned, all 6 eye stalks wrapped in cold compresses. "Every word you say requires another form in triplicate." But she couldn't stop. The truth was too fascinating. Humans had turned their planet's isolation from galactic society into an advantage. Without official oversight, they'd created an informal support system for any aliens who needed help. Need repairs but can't reach your authorized service center? See Big Joe? Crashed your ship and need a cover story? There's probably a farmer willing to stamp down some crop circles for you. Did you know, she told the Oversight Committee, who at this point were regular visitors to Chuck's Coffee, that humans have been using our various attempts at secrecy as entertainment? They made movies about us. When they spot our research pods, they just wave and go about their day. The final straw for the old guard came when Zyx'na submitted her revised thesis, Human Adaptability, a study in unofficial diplomacy and improvised solutions. In it, she proposed that humans weren't primitive at all. They'd simply taken a different path, one that favored practical solutions and personal connections over official protocols. The day of her presentation to the Galactic Council started exactly as one might expect, with complete chaos. The council chambers, normally a model of dignified procedure, had been thrown into disarray because someone, Zyx'na had her suspicions about the coffee shop network, had leaked the presentation time to the human media. There are 17 unauthorized human vehicles in the parking zone, one council security officer reported, panic-stricken. And one of them is selling something called hot dogs. How did they even get past our security? Demanded High Councillor Zyx'na. Well, the officer shuffled uncomfortably. They had the proper parking permits. We don't issue parking permits to humans. No, but apparently Big Joe's auto repair does, and they're surprisingly official-looking. Zyx'na stood at the presentation podium watching the council members shift uncomfortably in their ceremonial robes. Her research data was ready, her arguments prepared, and, thanks to Chuck's coaching, she had what humans called a secret weapon. Distinguished members of the council, she began, I've brought refreshments for today's presentation. She gestured to a table laden with coffee and donuts from Chuck's shop. The council members looked scandalized, but she noticed several of them eyeing the donuts with poorly concealed interest. This is highly irregular, High Councillor Zyx'na protested, even as he reached for a glazed donut. My entire point, Zyx'na continued, is that highly irregular is humanity's specialty. While we've been studying them, they've been quietly solving problems we didn't even know we had. Did you know that 47% of our research vessels now use human-designed cup holders? Or that the recent 30% improvement in our faster-than-light drives came from a human mechanic's suggestion to, and I quote, try turning it off and on again. The presentation screens behind her filled with data, charts, and, most damning of all, security camera footage of various council members sneaking into human establishments for coffee, repairs, and something called pizza. Furthermore, she pressed on, our current policy of isolation is frankly ridiculous. Half the galaxy is already getting their ships fixed by human mechanics. 3 council members have loyalty cards at Chuck's Coffee, and just last week, the Diplomatic Corps had their annual retreat catered by something called Bob's BBQ Shack. The council chamber erupted into whispers and guilty shuffling. High Councillor Zyx'na was on his 3rd donut. But the protocols, someone began, had to be hand-delivered because our quantum mail system was down, Zyx'na interrupted. And who fixed it? A human IT specialist who diagnosed the problem as cosmic ray interference, plus you needed to update your drivers. Just then, as if the universe itself had a sense of comic timing, the chamber's environmental control system made an ominous clicking sound and shut down. The council members began to sweat in their ceremonial robes as the temperature rose. Don't worry, a familiar voice called from the back, I can fix that. Big Joe walked in, toolbox in hand, wearing his usual grease-stained coveralls. Typical problem with these systems, they don't like Tuesdays. This is outrageous, High Councillor Zyx'na declared, reaching for another donut. We cannot simply allow... Actually, Joe interrupted, head deep in an access panel. You might want to make a decision quick. I put off fixing the council's quantum coffee maker to be here, and I hear the afternoon session gets pretty rough without caffeine. The vote to officially recognize Earth and establish formal diplomatic relations passed in record time, though some maintain it was less about Zyx'na's compelling argument and more about the Council's newfound addiction to Chuck's coffee and donuts. 3 months later, Zyx'na sat in her usual spot at Chuck's Coffee, all four hands wrapped around different beverages as she worked on her next research paper. The shop had changed since going officially into Galactic. There was now a quantum parking zone outside, and the menu included options for 17 different species. Chuck had even installed a gravity manipulator so the Jovian regulars could enjoy their coffee without floating into the ceiling. "You know what's funny?" Chuck said, sliding a fresh muffin across the counter. "Remember how scared you were of humans that first day? Now look at you. You're teaching Introduction to Human Culture at the Galactic Academy. And failing spectacularly at it," Zyx'na laughed. "How do you explain memes to a class of beings who've spent centuries communicating through formal diplomatic channels? Last week I tried to explain dad jokes and nearly caused an interstellar incident." The integration of human culture into galactic society had been interesting, to say the least. The Galactic Council had to create an entirely new department just to handle the paperwork generated by human innovations, most of which seemed to involve either duct tape or WD-40. The official guidebook, Understanding Humans, a comprehensive guide, had to be updated weekly and was still hopelessly behind. "Did you see the new human embassy?" Chuck asked, refilling her cups. "They built it out of shipping containers because someone bet them they couldn't. And it works better than our crystalline architecture," Zyx'na nodded. "Though I'm still not sure about their decision to paint it hot pink, just because another embassy said they wouldn't dare." Through the window, she could see Big Joe's newest venture, a combination auto repair shop and intergalactic cultural center. He was currently teaching a group of Rigelian diplomats how to use something called a bobblehead as a diagnostic tool for quantum drive alignment. Somehow it worked perfectly. Her research pod, still occasionally disguising itself as a Pinto despite numerous upgrades, was parked outside. She'd kept that particular glitch. It seemed fitting somehow. Plus, it had developed a strange attachment to human classic rock, playing Born to Run every time she started the engines. "You know what the best part is?" she mused, watching a group of alien tourists trying to figure out how to eat hot dogs without breaking local physics laws. "All those behaviors I thought were signs of primitive aggression or madness. Turns out humans are just really good at finding joy in chaos. They don't just survive, they turn survival into an art form, usually with a punchline." The shop's door chimed as Dr. Vendrix walked in, all 6 eye stalks now permanently relaxed, thanks to what he called exposure therapy, and what everyone else called accepting that humans gonna human. "Zyx'na, there you are," he called out. "The council needs your help. The humans have introduced something called Casual Friday to diplomatic protocols, and now the Centaurian ambassador is wearing something called a Hawaiian shirt to formal functions. Let me guess, because someone said it wasn't diplomatically appropriate." "Exactly, and now everyone's doing it." The Arcturus delegation showed up in flip-flops. Chuck leaned on the counter, grinning. "You know, for a species that was supposed to be primitive and dangerous, we've sure managed to confuse the galaxy with beachwear and breakfast foods." Zyx'na looked at her original research notes, still saved on her tablet. All those careful observations about human barbaric tendencies and collective madness now read like comedy. She'd been so worried about their unpredictability, their illogical approaches, their tendency to solve problems in the strangest possible ways. "I suppose," she said, finishing the last of her coffee, "that's what happens when you try to apply logical analysis to a species that invented both nuclear fusion and the whoopee cushion. Speaking of which," she turned to Dr. Vendrix, "has anyone warned the council about April Fool's Day yet?" The look of horror on her former superior's face was answer enough. She made a mental note to stock up on coffee and donuts. The galaxy was about to get a lot more interesting. In the parking lot, her pod played the opening notes of Born to Run as she prepared to head to her next research assignment. The camouflage system flickered briefly before settling on its usual Pinto disguise, now sporting a bumper sticker that read, "Honk if you've secretly been fixing alien spaceships since 1947. Chuck was right. Some humans had known all along. They just had a better sense of humor about it than the rest of the galaxy.